What if the signs of the apocalypse aren't just ancient prophecies, dusty texts whispered through millennia, but are in fact unfolding right now, in our lifetimes, before our very eyes? It's a question that gnaws at the edges of our collective consciousness, a shadowy doubt that flickers whenever we scroll through headlines or witness yet another unprecedented global event. For centuries, humanity has been captivated, terrified, and endlessly fascinated by the concept of the mark of the beast. From blockbuster movies depicting dystopian futures where every citizen is chipped, to intense theological debates in hushed church basements, this enigmatic symbol from ancient scripture has permeated our popular culture, shaping our fears and fueling our imaginations. The very phrase conjures images of a sinister, all-encompassing control, a final test of allegiance in a world gone mad. But is it merely a relic of religious lore, a metaphorical warning from a bygone era, or does it hold a chilling relevance to the hyper-connected, rapidly evolving world we inhabit today? Look around you. The past few years alone have plunged us into a maelstrom of global anxieties. We've weathered pandemics that brought the world to a standstill, exposing the fragility of our systems and the interconnectedness of our lives. We've seen economic shifts that have reshaped industries overnight, leaving millions grappling with uncertainty. And perhaps most profoundly, we are living through an unprecedented era of technological advancement, where what was once science fiction is now daily reality, from artificial intelligence that seems to learn at an impossible pace to biometric scanning that identifies us with a glance. These aren't isolated incidents. They form a tapestry of change so profound that it begs the question, are these merely the chaotic spasms of a world in flux, or are they signposts on a more predetermined path? Are we, as a species, unwittingly paving the way for our own prophesied downfall, meticulously constructing the very mechanisms that could enable such a frightening future? Or are these just coincidences, the natural progression of human ingenuity and societal evolution, simply interpreted through the lens of ancient fears? To truly understand the weight of this question, we must first journey back to its source. The concept of the mark of the beast is most famously articulated in the Book of Revelation, chapter 13. Here, a terrifying vision unfolds, a beast rising from the sea, granted power by a dragon, demanding worship. Crucially, another beast, rising from the earth, compels all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This passage has haunted generations, sparking endless speculation and myriad interpretations. Throughout history, this powerful imagery has been co-opted and reinterpreted to fit the fears and anxieties of each successive age. In the early Christian era, as believers faced brutal persecution under the Roman Empire, the mark was often seen as a symbol of allegiance to the emperor, a refusal to worship the Roman gods. The number 666, associated with the beast, was even linked to the numerical value of Emperor Nero's name in certain linguistic systems. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and the mark became a weapon in religious conflicts, hurled as an accusation against perceived enemies, specific popes by dissenting factions, or even the burgeoning Islamic empires by Christian crusaders. Each interpretation reflected the dominant power struggles and cultural anxieties of its time. But it's in the modern era, particularly in the last century, that the interpretations have taken a truly startling turn, moving beyond purely religious figures to encompass technological advancements. The invention of the barcode scanner in the 1970s sent shivers down the spines of many, who saw in its universal tracking capabilities a precursor to the prophesied economic control. Then came the microchip, initially as a way to track livestock, then pets, and eventually, with the advent of implantable RFID chips, the idea of human microchipping became terrifyingly real. More recently, the rise of sophisticated social credit systems in certain nations has added another layer of chilling possibility, where an individual's worth and access to services are determined by their adherence to state-approved behaviors. These diverse interpretations, spanning millennia, share a common thread. They speak to a fundamental human fear of losing control, of being coerced into conformity, and of economic exclusion. Apocalyptic literature, at its core, often serves as a symbolic commentary on these very themes: the struggle between good and evil, freedom and oppression, individual conscience and systemic control. The mark of the beast isn't just about a physical brand. It's about the ultimate allegiance, the surrender of autonomy, and the power to dictate who participates in society and who is cast out. It's a chilling narrative, and one that resonates with an unnerving clarity in our increasingly digital and interconnected world. The symbolic nature of apocalyptic literature, particularly the Book of Revelation, cannot be overstated. It's a tapestry woven with vivid imagery. Designed not just to predict future events with precise detail, but to convey profound truths about power, faith, and human nature. The beast rising from the sea, the dragon, the number 666, these elements are potent metaphors reflecting the anxieties of the time in which they were written, while simultaneously offering timeless warnings. They represent systems of oppression, idolatry, and the seductive allure of worldly power that demands absolute allegiance, often at the expense of individual integrity and spiritual freedom. The critical element isn't necessarily a literal monster, but rather the spirit of control and the suppression of dissent. This understanding helps us contextualize the historical interpretations we've already touched upon. When early Christians viewed the mark as a demand to worship Roman emperors, they weren't necessarily expecting a literal brand on their skin. Instead, it symbolized the ultimate test of their faith. Would they outwardly conform to the state religion, participating in rituals that acknowledge the emperor as divine, or would they refuse, facing persecution and economic ruin? The choice was a spiritual mark, a declaration of allegiance. Similarly, the medieval accusations against popes or Islamic empires weren't always about a physical mark, but about a perceived deviation from true faith, an alignment with what was deemed an antichrist system. These were conceptual battles, fought with theological interpretations as much as with swords. What's fascinating is how these core themes of control, worship, and economic exclusion have persisted across millennia, merely adapting their outward form to fit the technological and societal landscapes. The prophecy's power lies in its adaptability, its ability to feel relevant regardless of the specific historical context. The underlying fear remains constant. The threat of a system so pervasive, so powerful, that it can dictate who participates in society and who is cast out, effectively controlling every aspect of life, from commerce to conscience. This fear is not new. It's deeply embedded in the human psyche, a primal dread of losing autonomy. Consider the evolution of these fears in modern times. The barcode, initially a marvel of logistical efficiency, quickly became a symbol of potential surveillance. Its ability to track goods and sales, while beneficial for business, ignited concerns about its eventual application to individuals. The microchip, a tiny piece of technology with immense data storage potential, took these fears to another level. From tracking packages to tracking pets, the leap to tracking humans seemed inevitable to many, especially with discussions around implantable devices for medical records or identification. The fear wasn't just about the chip itself, but what it represented, a potential mechanism for a global, inescapable system of identification and control. And then we arrive at the social credit systems, a truly contemporary manifestation of these ancient anxieties. These systems, which evaluate citizens based on their behavior, financial standing, and even social interactions, and then grant or deny access to services based on that score, embody the very essence of economic exclusion and coercive control described in Revelation. They don't require a physical mark. The mark is an invisible score, a digital reputation that determines one's ability to buy, sell, travel, or even secure a job. The system demands conformity, and failure to comply carries tangible, often severe consequences. These modern interpretations, whether they focus on barcodes, microchips, or social credit, all highlight the symbolic nature of the mark. It's not just a physical emblem, it's a symbolic declaration of allegiance to a system, a set of values, or an authority that stands in opposition to individual freedom and, for many, spiritual truth. The power to buy or sell, to participate in the economy, becomes the leverage point. This is the ultimate form of control, where dissent can lead to complete ostracization and inability to function within society. The narrative of the mark of the beast thus serves as a powerful cautionary tale, urging us to remain vigilant against any system that seeks to subjugate human freedom through economic or social coercion. It compels us to question authority and to safeguard our autonomy in an increasingly interconnected and technologically advanced world. This brings us to the very threshold of our current technological landscape, a world where the lines between convenience and control are increasingly blurred. The rise of digital identification and the relentless march towards cashless societies are not futuristic predictions, but present-day realities unfolding before our eyes. We are witnessing an unprecedented integration of technology into every facet of our lives, from the mundane act of purchasing groceries to the intricate systems governing our national economies. Biometric scanning, once the stuff of spy thrillers, is now commonplace, securing our smartphones with a fingerprint or granting access to buildings with a facial scan. These technologies, while undeniably efficient and often enhancing security, simultaneously lay the groundwork for systems of identification that are far more pervasive and less easily circumvented than anything humanity has encountered before. The convenience of simply looking at a camera or tapping a finger is seductive, yet it ushers in an era where our unique biological markers become our universal keys, binding us ever more tightly to digital systems. Parallel to this is the rapid evolution of digital currencies. While cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin emerged from a desire for decentralized financial systems, the more recent and perhaps more impactful development is the push for central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These state-issued digital currencies promise greater financial efficiency, reduced transaction costs, and enhanced control over monetary policy. However, they also raise profound questions about privacy and individual economic freedom. Imagine a world where every transaction you make is not just recorded, but potentially visible and controllable by a central authority. The ability to buy, sell, or even hold money could become conditional, dictated by adherence to certain regulations or social norms. This potential for a global interconnected financial system where digital identities are inextricably linked to digital money paints a picture of unprecedented economic oversight. The convenience it offers is immense, but the implications for personal autonomy are equally vast and concerning. The core of the debate here lies in the delicate balance between convenience and control. On one hand, these technologies offer undeniable benefits: faster transactions, reduced fraud, more streamlined public services, and enhanced security. They promise a world free from the inefficiencies and vulnerabilities of physical cash or cumbersome identification documents. On the other hand, they introduce the specter of ubiquitous surveillance and the potential for exclusion. If your digital identity is tied to your ability to transact, and that identity can be monitored and even sanctioned, then the power wielded by those who control these systems becomes immense. The very infrastructure designed for convenience could become the ultimate tool for social engineering, limiting access to essential services or even basic commerce for those deemed non-compliant. This brings us directly to the chilling concept of social credit systems, a real-world implementation that embodies many of the anxieties found in apocalyptic narratives. While most prominently discussed in certain nations, the underlying principles are globally relevant. These systems assess citizens based on a myriad of factors: financial history, online behavior, civic participation, even social connections, assigning a score that dictates their access to everything from loans and housing to travel and employment. In such a system, an individual's trustworthiness is quantified, and deviation from prescribed norms carries tangible penalties. The mark here isn't a literal brand on the skin, but an invisible digital score that determines one's place and participation in society. It's a powerful mechanism for encouraging conformity, where individual freedoms can be subtly eroded in the name of collective order or perceived social good. The implications for personal liberty and the potential for systemic discrimination are profound, showing how technology, when wielded without sufficient ethical safeguards, can create a world where economic and social exclusion become frighteningly easy to implement. This is where the ancient fears of being unable to buy or sell without the mark find their most chillingly modern echo. This chilling modern echo of ancient fears isn't an isolated phenomenon. It's deeply intertwined with the tumultuous tapestry of recent global events and societal shifts. We've witnessed a succession of unprecedented crises in rapid succession: a global pandemic that brought economies to a standstill, supply chain disruptions that laid bare the fragility of our interconnected world, and geopolitical conflicts that have reshaped alliances and ignited new tensions. These aren't just isolated incidents. They are powerful accelerators, pushing societies to adopt new technologies and accept increased government oversight at a pace previously unimaginable. Consider the pandemic, for instance. Faced with a novel threat, governments worldwide implemented widespread tracking, digital health passports, and mandates that significantly altered daily life. While presented as temporary measures for public health, they normalized a level of digital identification and control that many would have resisted fiercely just years prior. The urgency of the crisis made such intrusions seem not just acceptable, but necessary. Similarly, supply chain vulnerabilities highlighted the need for greater efficiency and resilience, often leading to calls for more centralized planning and digital management of resources. These events, while seemingly disparate, contribute to a global environment ripe for the implementation of advanced control systems, whether for public safety, economic stability, or national security. Beyond the practical adoption of technology, these crises have also had a profound impact on the social fabric, leading to increasing polarization and societal divisions. We see nations, communities, and even families fractured by differing beliefs, political ideologies, and interpretations of reality. This fragmentation, this us versus them mentality, resonates eerily with apocalyptic narratives that often depict a world divided, with clear lines drawn between those who conform and those who resist. The constant barrage of information, often conflicting and emotionally charged, fuels distrust in institutions and traditional sources of authority, leading many to seek answers in alternative narratives, including prophetic interpretations. The psychological impact of living in a state of perpetual crisis cannot be overstated. When the world feels unpredictable and threatening, the human mind naturally seeks patterns, meaning, and explanations. This innate need for order in chaos often leads people towards narratives that offer a comprehensive framework for understanding current events. For many, ancient prophecies and apocalyptic texts provide such a framework, offering a sense of foresight and control in an otherwise uncontrollable world. It's a powerful psychological anchor, even if it leads to interpretations that might seem extreme to an outside observer. This search for meaning, coupled with the erosion of trust and the acceleration of technological adoption, creates a fertile ground for the belief that biblical prophecies are unfolding in real time. When digital currencies are discussed, when vaccine passports are mandated, or when social credit systems are implemented, they are inevitably viewed through the lens of ancient warnings about a mark that dictates who can buy or sell. The fear isn't just about the technology itself, but about what it represents. A potential loss of individual autonomy, a world where compliance is enforced through economic and social exclusion. It's a deep-seated anxiety about control, amplified by the relentless pace of change and the feeling that humanity is hurtling towards an unknown future, perhaps one already foretold. The world feels less like a collection of independent nations and more like a single interconnected system, vulnerable to systemic shocks and ripe for centralized solutions that could, intentionally or not, fulfill prophecies of ultimate control. This brings us to a crucial point in our exploration, the mark in modern interpretation, which might extend far beyond a literal microchip or an implanted device. While the image of a physical mark is compelling and easily visualized, many contemporary interpretations suggest that the true mark could be far more subtle, representing an allegiance or conformity to a dominant system or ideology, rather than a tangible etching on the skin. It's a shift from a physical brand to a psychological or spiritual alignment, a willing submission to a worldview that might subtly erode individual autonomy and spiritual freedom. Consider the pervasive power of media, propaganda, and groupthink in shaping our beliefs and behaviors today. In an age of unprecedented information flow, narratives can be crafted and disseminated globally in an instant. These narratives, whether political, social, or economic, often carry with them implicit or explicit demands for conformity. Think about the pressure to adopt certain viewpoints, to participate in particular social movements, or to align with specific consumer trends. This isn't about coercion through force, but through persuasion, through the creation of a societal atmosphere where certain ideas are celebrated and others are ostracized. The mark in this context isn't an external imposition, but an internal adoption, a mental and emotional agreement to the prevailing system. Societal pressures can indeed lead to a voluntary submission to systems that might restrict personal autonomy, often without individuals even fully realizing the implications. We live in highly interconnected societies where social capital, professional opportunities, and even access to basic services can be tied to our adherence to certain norms or digital identities. Imagine a world where expressing a dissenting opinion on social media could impact your credit score, your ability to travel, or even your employment prospects. This isn't science fiction. Elements of such systems are already emerging in various forms globally. In such an environment, the mark becomes less about a physical identifier and more about a chosen path of least resistance, an unspoken agreement to conform in order to navigate daily life successfully. It's a subtle but powerful form of control, where the fear of exclusion becomes a potent motivator for compliance. This interpretation also leads us to consider the idea of a spiritual mark, a profound shift in values or priorities that aligns with a non-divine authority, effectively replacing traditional spiritual or ethical frameworks. If the mark of the beast is fundamentally about worship and allegiance, then a spiritual mark would represent a transfer of ultimate loyalty from a divine source to a worldly system. This could manifest as an overwhelming devotion to material success, an uncritical acceptance of state authority, or an unquestioning belief in technological progress as the ultimate solution to all human problems. It's a reorientation of the soul, where the pursuit of worldly comfort, security, or social acceptance eclipses deeper moral or spiritual convictions. This isn't necessarily about overt idol worship, but a more insidious process where human agency and ethical discernment are gradually outsourced to algorithms, powerful institutions, or popular opinion. In this scenario, the mark is less about a branding and more about a surrender of critical thought and individual conscience. It's about allowing external forces to dictate what is true, what is good, and what is valuable. The profound implication here is that the mark might not be something we are forced to take, but something we are subtly persuaded to embrace, a quiet capitulation to the prevailing currents of the age, driven by convenience, fear, or the desire to belong. The apocalypse, in this view, wouldn't be a sudden, dramatic event, but a gradual erosion of spiritual independence and human freedom, almost imperceptibly woven into the fabric of everyday life. This interpretation challenges us to look beyond the sensational and consider the subtle ways our values and allegiances are being shaped in the modern world. While these interpretations of the mark of the beast offer compelling modern parallels, it's crucial to approach them with a critical lens, avoiding the pitfalls of literalism and fear-mongering that have historically plagued apocalyptic discussions. Throughout history, countless individuals and groups have been identified as the Antichrist or the Beast, from Roman emperors like Nero to figures as disparate as Napoleon, Hitler, and even various popes. Each era, facing its own unique challenges and anxieties, has sought to fit current events into the prophetic framework, often with disastrous consequences for those labeled as the enemy. This cyclical nature of apocalyptic anxieties highlights a fundamental human tendency to seek definitive answers and assign blame during times of uncertainty, often overlooking the deeper, more symbolic messages embedded in ancient texts. The dangers of literalism are particularly pronounced when dealing with texts like the Book of Revelation, which is rich in symbolic language, metaphors, and allegories. To interpret every detail as a direct, future event risks missing the profound spiritual and moral lessons these writings offer. For instance, the number of the beast, 666, has been meticulously calculated and reapplied to virtually every perceived threat over centuries, often leading to absurd conclusions and unnecessary panic. The original context of Revelation was likely a message of hope and endurance for early Christians facing persecution, using coded language understandable to them but perplexing to outsiders. Reducing such complex spiritual literature to a literal checklist for modern events not only distorts its original purpose, but also diverts attention from the very real ethical dilemmas and societal challenges we face today. The importance of critical thinking cannot be overstated when navigating these complex prophecies and their contemporary interpretations. Distinguishing between genuine threats, like the erosion of privacy through unchecked technological advancement, and speculative interpretations, such as a microchip being the literal mark, requires a discerning mind. We must question the sources of information, evaluate the evidence, and consider alternative explanations before succumbing to fear-driven narratives. Are we witnessing the inevitable unfolding of a predetermined prophecy, or are we experiencing the consequences of human choices, technological progress, and societal structures that we ourselves have created? This brings us to the crucial role of human agency. The idea that humanity is merely a passive spectator in a predefined apocalyptic drama can be disempowering and dangerous. If everything is predetermined, what incentive do we have to act ethically, to advocate for justice, or to protect freedom? Instead, many theologians and futurists emphasize that our future is not written in stone, but is constantly being shaped by the collective decisions and actions of individuals and societies. We have the power to influence the trajectory of technology, to establish ethical guidelines for its use, and to resist systems that seek to control or diminish human dignity. Consider the development of artificial intelligence or biometric identification. These technologies are not inherently evil. They possess immense potential for good, from advancing medical research to enhancing security. However, their application and the societal frameworks within which they operate are entirely within human control. If we allow these tools to be used in ways that erode privacy, suppress dissent, or create systems of pervasive surveillance, that is a consequence of our choices, our priorities, and our collective will. The mark then becomes less about an external imposition and more about the internal choices we make regarding our values, our freedoms, and the kind of world we wish to inhabit. It's about being active participants in shaping our destiny rather than passively awaiting a prophesied doom. This perspective empowers us to engage with the world, to question, to challenge, and to build a future aligned with human flourishing, irrespective of ancient prophecies. So, as we bring our exploration to a close, we've journeyed through the intricate tapestry of apocalyptic fears, from ancient prophecies to the cutting-edge technologies of today. We've seen how the concept of the mark of the beast, rooted deeply in the book of Revelation, has been reinterpreted across millennia, reflecting the anxieties and technological paradigms of each era. From the persecution of early Christians to the specter of barcodes, microchips, and digital currencies, the human imagination has consistently sought to find tangible manifestations of this powerful symbol of control and allegiance. We've dissected the remarkable acceleration of digital identification, the rise of cashless societies, and the pervasive creep of biometric scanning, all under the guise of convenience and security. These advancements, while offering undeniable efficiencies, simultaneously raise profound questions about surveillance, individual freedom, and the potential for unprecedented social and economic exclusion. Global events, from pandemics to geopolitical upheavals, have not only hastened the adoption of these technologies, but have also amplified societal divisions, feeding into narratives of a world teetering on the brink. Crucially, we've moved beyond the simplistic notion of a literal physical mark. We've considered the mark as a potent symbol of allegiance, a conformity to dominant systems or ideologies that might subtly erode personal autonomy. The pervasive influence of media, the subtle pressures of groupthink, and the allure of societal acceptance can all contribute to a collective shift in values, aligning individuals with systems that may not serve their highest good. This spiritual mark suggests a transformation not just of the body, but of the very soul and its priorities, prioritizing a non-divine authority over intrinsic human dignity and freedom. Yet, we've also stressed the vital importance of critical analysis and a healthy skepticism towards fear-mongering. History is replete with examples of apocalyptic predictions that failed to materialize, reminding us that ancient texts rich in symbolism and metaphor should not be reduced to literal blueprints for the future. The cyclical nature of these anxieties reveals more about the human condition and our perennial search for meaning in times of uncertainty than it does about an inevitable predetermined fate. Our capacity for reason, our ability to question, and our collective agency stand as powerful bulwarks against succumbing to disempowering narratives. Therefore, whether the mark ultimately manifests as a literal implant, a pervasive digital identity, or a more subtle ideological conformity, the underlying concerns remain profoundly real. These are concerns about the erosion of individual freedom, the concentration of power, and the very essence of what it means to be human in an increasingly interconnected and technologically advanced world. The discussion is not merely academic, it cuts to the core of our ethical responsibilities and our vision for the future. This journey then serves as an urgent call to intellectual action. It implores us to engage critically with the world around us, to scrutinize the narratives presented to us, and to participate actively in shaping the trajectory of our societies. Do not passively accept the march of technology without questioning its implications. Do not surrender your critical faculties to fear or dogma. Instead, foster thoughtful discussions about technology's ethical boundaries, the preservation of human values, and the kind of future we collectively wish to build. The true mark might not be something branded upon us by an external force, but rather the sum total of the choices we make, individually and collectively, in an increasingly complex and rapidly evolving world. It is in these choices for freedom, for justice, for human dignity, that our ultimate destiny will truly be forged.